When I do this podcast, I often hear like these faint screams from a bunch of directions as people are shouting guesses. How did you not think of this? Most people think it's OJ, including me. Legally, he was not charged, therefore this case remains technically unsolved. The way the Zodiac toyed with police and reporters. Is there a more famous unsolved serial killer than Jack the Ripper? I mean, would you put Jack the Ripper above Zodiac? When they capture him, he's like, damn, I shouldn't have painted the exact same designs that I do on my murals. I should have known that would come back to get me. Canadian authorities have yet to determine how the feet end up there or why. People with like a foot fetish would be way into this case. Poor Mexican border town where hundreds, some say thousands, of women have been raped, tortured, and then killed. The police don't have a priority on them the same way in America you have a priority on young blonde white girls, as I'm talking to one now. Tupac was taken to the hospital where he died of internal bleeding after 6 days. When you get to that level of fame and celebrity, you don't know who your real friends are anymore. Need a distraction? We got you. Today I'm joined for the first time ever by true crime podcaster Alex, host of the Weird Distractions podcast. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm good. You're in Canada, right?
I am. How did you know?
Well, I've been listening to you a lot late this week as I'm getting ready for this show, and I've definitely heard those boots and those.
Okay, I didn't think it was that bad until I think my last recording I said something like, oh my god, it's actually that bad. The maple syrup was just pouring through my veins as I was saying. I couldn't stop it.
Yeah. Well, I wish I had known you were from Canada sooner, or I would have canceled this because we've already hit our Canada quota for this show.
Oh, no.
Brad Choma, I don't know if you've heard him. He hit up his episodes, but that's about as much Canadian as I need for one lifetime. But I guess you're already here, so we can go ahead and keep going.
Everyone needs a little bit more of Canada in their life. That's my mantra. It's not really, but for this episode it is.
Well, Alex, we were just talking before we hit record that just by sheer coincidence, we're recording today on the same date that you released your final episode of Weird Distractions podcast, which I'm super bummed to see go, but I know you're going to do great things in the future. So on your show, Weird Distractions, you cover true crime, paranormal, conspiracies, etc. And today we're going to guess something that's kind of in your wheelhouse, and that is the top 10 most famous unsolved cases, the unsolved mysteries, however you want to call it.
Goodness.
So that's good. You're okay with that?
Yes, I'm good with it. Hopefully I don't make my listeners doubt my knowledge, but yeah, I shouldn't say I love because it's kind of sad, but
you love murder and violence and gory blood and
despite my
suffering of others.
Yeah, despite my Canadian outer shell, inside is just a dark hole of despair and macabre suffering. So yeah,
I find that's pretty common with Canadians.
Yeah, we're all just filled with a little bit of rage and a little bit of
and a little maple syrup. Well, this was a hard one to do, this list, research-wise, because listeners of my show will know that typically 9 times out of 10, the lists we cover on Tennis Podcast are quantitative in nature. They're ranked based on data. They're not opinion-driven. But today is one of the exceptions. So I went to a high-profile news source, which is Time Magazine, and their editors compiled what they feel are the top 10 most famous unsolved cases in history. Now, I'll say there is kind of an American bias here. I'll say there is maybe 1 or 2 non-American cases, but so again, this is what Time Magazine calls the top 10 unsolved cases. So when you're guessing this list, you want to consider what are the most talked about, the most analyzed, the most famous true crime cases that don't have a definitive ending. Last thing I'll say is for our listeners, because I know not everyone that listens to my show is into true crime, the episode will touch on some uncomfortable subject matter like the murder of children, the murder of adults, and a lot of other murder and stuff. But we will remain fairly high level in the description, so if you're not too into true crime, don't worry. It won't be super graphic today. It'll be a little graphic, but it won't be too bad. I'll turn you loose now. You're going to guess the top 10 most famous unsolved cases, according to Time Magazine. Most of these, I'd say at least 7 or 8 of them, extremely famous. Like almost anybody, at least in North America, could tell you about these cases. There's 1 or 2 that I think you might need some help with, but otherwise, I think you could guess all these.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna say the death of Natalie Wood. Is that on the list?
Great guess. No. We got plenty of death.
Okay,
many on here death today.
Okay.
I think it's like all death, but cool. That one is not on here.
The Black Dahlia case.
So Black Dahlia, you guessed. Black Dahlia is here. where do you think Black Dahlia ranks in the top 10? Remember, number 1 is the most famous. Number 10 is, still really famous, but 10 out of 10 on this.
It's got to be like top 5. I'm going to guess number 2. Because I don't want to say 1. Because initially it was 1, but now I'm like,
I know Weird Distractions, your true crime paranormal podcast.
Yes.
It just ended with 200 episodes, and you've talked about doing a future podcast of some kind. I'm going to suggest maybe you do a podcast about, shoes or movies or food. Because I'm not seeing the true crime. I'm kidding. I mean, I'm not kidding. I'm kidding. It's number 9. Number 9 is the Black Dahlia.
Oh my gosh, this might be a long episode.
Right?
That's a lot
But
lower.
when you see what's higher than it.
Okay.
Yeah, when you see what's higher than it, maybe you'll come around. Because I think it deserves to be higher, but not top 5.
Weird. Okay.
So Black Dahlia, here's what happened to the to those that aren't familiar. On the morning of January 15th, 1947, a mother taking her child for a walk in a Los Angeles neighborhood stumbled upon a gruesome sight. The body of a young naked woman clean in half at the waist. The body was just a few feet from the sidewalk and posed in such a way that the mother reportedly thought it was a mannequin at first glance. Can you imagine walking along the sidewalk with your child and you see a dead, cut in half body?
Absolutely. No, thank you.
In the 40s, too.
Yeah.
Despite the extensive mutilation and cuts on the body, there wasn't a drop of blood at the scene, indicating that the young woman had been killed elsewhere and then dumped. Her body had been cut in half and appeared to have been drained of blood with precision. The murderer also cut 3-inch gashes into the corner of her mouth, creating a spooky clown-esque smile. So think the Joker in The Dark Knight. Kind of the same smile forced upon her face with a blade.
Gross.
At first, no one knew who this was, but it turned out to be 22-year-old Hollywood hopeful named Elizabeth Short, who was later dubbed the Black Dahlia by the press for her rumored penchant for sheer black clothes and for the Black Dahlia movie out at that time. Her murder became a sensation, not only because of its location in the showbiz capital, but also because the police worked in tandem with the press to disseminate clues in hopes of locating a suspect. Her life and death have been the basis of numerous books and films, and her murder is frequently cited as one of the most famous unsolved murders in the United States. Black Dahlia. What do you think?
Number 9. That's what weirds me out. Like, I thought it was going to be super, super high, but here we are at number 9. So I don't know. I feel like I'm now going to be a lost dog at the rest of these guesses.
A lost dog. Well, you got to remember that there's no shortage of horrible, horrific shit that's happened in the world that is unsolved. So while the Black Dahlia is still number 9 out of however many millions of true crime cases, that's not too bad.
No, that's very true.
By the way, I forgot to say at the top that my sources, I mentioned Time Magazine, but I also pulled some stats from the FBI's website and economictimes.com and Wikipedia. The interesting thing about Black Dahlia is how, now, I could be wrong, but as memory serves, they never really had, I don't think they arrested anybody for this.
No.
And if they did, they didn't get too far with it. It was kind of just an ice-cold case. It never went anywhere.
Yeah, they had a couple suspects, I believe, but I don't think they suspected, I think, a doctor, like a local doctor or dentist who allegedly did, illegal abortions or something. But other than that, nothing. So yeah, it's been unsolved for so long.
I know there's a lot of speculation about a doctor or a surgeon or something like that because of the quote-unquote, precision in the mutilation. So that makes sense. And that's going to come up again later in another case too. But Black Dahlia, it's obviously there's a million books and stuff on it, but there hasn't been a ton of film. I mean, I know there was the movie called Black Dahlia, but it wasn't that great. It didn't do great. But it's kind of surprising that there hasn't been more done with that.
No, well, I know American Horror Story did a nod to it in, was it House? The first season? I forget what season it was, but they did a little bit of a nod to it. Other than that, I think you're right. I don't really know of anything else. There's probably someone screaming in their car at both of us, being like, but there's this film and this one. And we're just, you know what? We'll figure it out.
When I do this podcast, I often hear these faint screams from a bunch of directions as people are shouting guesses and shouting how did you not think of this? And yeah, that kind of just comes with the territory on the show.
It's either that or your house is haunted. But let's go with the first option because the second one
or
probably.
Both. Oh, well, do you have another guess? So that was Black Dahlia at number 9.
Okay, number 9. So Black Dahlia. Okay, and it wasn't Natalie Wood. She's not on there. And the reason why I brought that up is because I literally just listened to an episode about that that death today.
There's at least one more that is in LA, which is where Black Dahlia happened.
Is there any that is just unsolved because it's like an unsolved, they don't know who did it? Like a serial killer-esque?
There's serial killer-esque stuff on here, but I'm going to direct you to this one, which is...
Okay.
This is one that I don't think you or anyone else would guess. Even though it's one of the most famous murders in American history, I don't think it's going to be one you guess because most people assume who did it. But he was never legally found guilty.
Can I make a guess? Like a side-off guess? Did he play football?
He did play foosball, yes.
Oh, foosball. Okay. Is it
football? Yes.
Is it the oh my gosh, Nicole Brown? The murder of Nicole Brown?
Yep.
Is that her name?
Nicole Brown, okay. Ron Goldman double murder.
There we go.
Which was done by football player O.J. Simpson. So, do you think this ranks higher or lower than the Black Dahlia?
I'm gonna say it ranks higher because I think the era it took place and the kind of media frenzy that followed behind it and their status is basically in the media. I think it is definitely higher. I also, sidebar, I went to my first NFL game for New Year's. This is like in 2023 going in 2024. And we went to Buffalo and, mind my own business, whatever. I look up and there's his name. And I'm like, this true crime just follows me everywhere I go these days. Yeah, because it's in the stadium.
Where was his name?
In the Buffalo Stadium.
I'm just surprised they haven't taken that down, any mention of him. But was it like his jersey or something?
No, it was his name. It was O.J. Simpson and then his number. And at first I looked at it, I was like, oh, like whatever. I didn't think anything of it for some reason. Could be because your beers at the stadiums are like a million feet tall in comparison to ours. They're like double tall boys. It's insane. And my friend made a comment about it. She's like, is that OJ's? Like OJ is an like OJ, and I looked. I was like, "Oh my god!" And like it's still just chilling there. So I don't know. I don't know if it's just because someone that's behind that doesn't think he did it, even though he wrote a book and it's kind of clear. But yeah, sorry, that was my little tidbit of OJ.
No, I'm surprised to hear that because I would have thought the Buffalo Bills and the NFL would have like scrubbed him from the record books essentially. Because I mean, he was an accomplished player. He played for the Bills. He may have played for others too. But so let's talk about it. This murder.
Yeah.
I would say almost everybody kind of knows it was him. He got off on a technicality. So even though most people think it's OJ, including me, even though that's the case, legally, criminally, he was not charged. Therefore, this case remains technically unsolved. That's why it's on this list. And it's number 6, by the way.
Okay, so yes. Okay, that makes sense.
OJ was nicknamed the Juice. Right there, I mean...
That's a problem.
Yep. An American football running back, broadcaster, actor, spokesman. He was once a popular figure within the U.S. public. He is now best known for being tried for the murders of his former wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ron Goldman. The pair were stabbed to death outside Brown's condominium in the Brentwood neighborhood of L.A. on the night of June 12, 1990. Coming up on 30 years, actually. After investigators found a bloodstained glove on his property, and after he did not turn himself in at the agreed time, he became the object of a low-speed pursuit in a white 1993 Ford Bronco SUV owned and driven by his friend Al Callings. TV stations interrupted coverage of the 1994 NBA Finals to broadcast live coverage of the pursuit, which was watched by an estimated 95 million people. It's insane.
That's a lot.
The pursuit and Simpson's subsequent arrest were among the most widely publicized events in American history. The trial also made a household name of Johnny Cochran, the lawyer who was able to convince the jury that there was reasonable doubt concerning the DNA evidence in this case, which was a relatively new form of evidence in trials at the time. Finally, more than 100 million people watched from home the trial, which is about as much tuned in for the Super Bowl. O.J. Simpson was found not guilty. After that, he was found liable in some civil suits that were filed. So he did have to pay money, of which he paid very little of it. But so he got his hand slapped there, but criminally he was not charged. Well, I guess he was charged, but he was acquitted. I think that's it. So I'll just plug real quick. I did cover this more in depth in the episode 166 from our archives. We covered the top 10 most watched court trials in television history. This was obviously one of them. So Alex, I know you were telling me before that you're a big fan of OJ and you believe he's innocent. So can you expand on that?
I'm gonna get shot. Don't say that. No, absolutely
Alex did not say that, to be clear.
To be very clear, my stance is that I don't believe he did it. Like, it's just, honestly, you know,
I don't think it's reasonable. Sorry, Alex. I don't think it's reasonable that anyone could look at the evidence and come to any other conclusion.
There's a history of domestic violence. She was hanging out with a male friend who, you know, sources are varying in terms of whether they were romantically together or not. I think, whatever, they were hanging out.
They're grown adults. And OJ was divorced from her.
Exactly. And he had a history of a temper. I'm just saying, between that and just how everything was laid out in court, and then that fucking technicality, that, and on top of, after the fact, the stupid book he published, or not he published, but someone published for him.
Was that the one
that
he wrote? If I Did It?
Yeah, If I Did It.
And if is in really tiny print.
Yeah. And that's the thing, it's, people always say, well, if he actually did it, why would he post something like that? Because he's a man and he's wealthy. He's a wealthy man with resources who literally just got away with murder. Of course he's gonna showboat. Like, and I hate to typecast athletes, but he kind of fits that stereotypical mold of, you know, if I can win this, no, I can do this. No one's gonna touch me. Everyone loves me. I'm the juice man. It's like, no.
I agree. Every athlete should be a suspect of murder.
Oh, absolutely.
I know that's not what you're saying. But it's crazy too, because I mean, he was on top of the world at the time this happened. He had a bunch of what do you call them? Like spokesman deals. He was on TV. He was in movies. He was popular. He was well liked. He's kind of, you know, he's like your modern day athletes that are well loved. He was that, and he had a whole life of that ahead of him. If he could have just held in his anger and not fucking killed the mother of his children and a friend, and he's gotten his life has been, I mean, I don't know, he should be in prison, so there's that, but his life has not been the best either. He's gotten in trouble in other ways. I know he did go to prison in like the 2010s, I think, for some Vegas
didn't he
robbery.
Steal? Didn't he steal like an NFL ring or something, which is like, are you fucking kidding me? I
don't recall the details, but it was something petty like that. And he did get like a few years in prison. I'm doing this from memory. I'm not sure.
Same.
I know something like that happened. But yeah, he threw it all away and he took the innocent life of two people as well. So fuck him.
Yep.
O.J. Simpson murdering Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman at number 6. So what is an actual unsolved mystery that might be on here?
Oh gosh. Is anything to do with his Zodiac on there? Because I feel like...
Yes.
The Zodiac, I feel like, has got to be... Heck, let's go number 4. I'm aiming high. I'm shooting for the stars.
Well, you didn't shoot far enough. Because it's number 2, the Zodiac Killings.
Holy crap, really?
No, I go back and forth on this because what's more famous than the Zodiac Killings, right? Like very few things.
Yeah.
Like it's super well known. They had the big Hollywood movie that brought more attention to it. So, but on the other hand, I don't know. Let's talk about it. We'll get through it.
Yeah, okay.
So it is number 2, according to Time magazine, for the most famous unsolved cases. The Zodiac murdered 5 known victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 69, so only 10 months, operating in rural, urban, and suburban settings. He targeted young couples as well as a lone male cab driver. His known attacks took place, well, I already said, in the San Francisco area. 2 of his wounded victims did survive, and he, the Zodiac, claims to have murdered 37 victims, but only 5 have ever been proven. What made the case so fascinating, though, was the way the Zodiac toyed with police and reporters. He called in several of the murders and began to send coded letters to newspapers using a cross within a circle as his symbol. Some of the letters included cryptograms or ciphers in which the killer claimed that he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife. Of the 4 ciphers he produced, 2 remain unsolved, and 1 was only cracked in the year 2020. So there's still 2 that we don't know, and I mean, probably not, but there's a chance he reveals his identity in one of these 2 unwritten ones, or undeciphered ones. While many theories regarding the identity of the killer have been suggested, the only suspect authorities ever publicly named was Arthur Lee Allan, a former schoolteacher and convicted sex offender who died in 1990. Although the Zodiac ceased written communications around 1974, the unusual nature of the case led to the international interest interest that has been sustained through the years. The Zodiac was never caught, and the story continues to terrorize people to this day. See David Fincher's masterful 2007 film. That's the thing, Zodiac's never been caught. It's, I wonder if on this list would have been
Golden State Killer.
Golden State Killer. That was also 60s, maybe early 70s at the latest. He went 30, 40 years without getting into trouble again, and then some DNA tests found him. There's still some chance that the Zodiac could be out there.
Yeah.
He'd be a very old man, but could be listening now.
He could be listening this very moment in the nursing home, cranked.
Fuck you, Zodiac.
Yeah, fuck you if you're
Unsubscribe.
listening. We don't want your rating and review.
Well, no. Still rate the 5 stars. Hang on.
Wait, whoa.
Rate the 5 stars and then unsubscribe.
I remember being a kid, because the movie came out, 2007? So I was still a kid, and I remember watching it and being fascinated and just digging my head into that case. To this day, I have no idea who could have done it. I think if anyone did know, they should speak up. But it's one of those cases too that I think because the media attention, because whoever did was writing these letters and making all these codes. As humans, we want to try and solve everything that comes to us. I think we're very problem-solving creatures, and because we haven't, that's why we get so enthralled by cases like this, especially when there's weird little nooks and crannies that it's like, wait, but maybe it means this, or maybe he meant that, or maybe he did it because of this, or try to guess his mental health diagnosis, when in reality we might never know, which is also ultimately frustrating.
Well, and there's also the fact, all of what you said is very spot on, and in addition to that, there's also the reality that he's gotten away with it. Whoever this guy is has gotten away with it. And so, some people think it's more than one guy, by the way.
Yeah.
But no matter what, they've gotten away with it, and they probably will. If they're not already dead, they will be soon. And I don't know. There's something very unsatisfying about that. It's like watching a great movie and getting to the 90% and then turning it off right at the climax. It's going to leave you unsatisfied. I think it's very natural that humans are captivated by unsolved cases like this.
Yeah, number 2, though. I'm not surprised. I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised. Do you know what I mean? It makes sense, but I'm just the Black Dahlia being number 9. I don't know why that's really sticking to me right now. All right, Time Magazine.
You've been Black Dahlia, Alex.
Pretty much. Just kidding, no.
No, probably not.
Horrifically.
Yeah. We know you like to listen to Tennis Podcast, but now it's time to wear it. TennisPod.com/merch has all of your merch needs. We have new designs that let the world know you're a sidekick host, or that your loved one should just go ahead and unsubscribe. All these and more are available to wear on your tight little body right now. We also have designs for the licking machine, your body elves, and many others. We even have one that proves you have one hell of an ass. We have shirts available for all sexes and multiple colors available, as well as mugs, hoodies, and hats. And to help you get started, I have a special discount for you. Use promo code BUTT for 10% off your next order. That's promo code BUTT at tennispod.com/MERCH. Don't be a butt. Shop now. So I'm looking through. There's one more serial killer on this list. You don't have to guess him now if you don't want, but yeah, I'll let you go wherever you want to go. There's a Canadian case on here as well.
I'm going to guess the other serial killer because I have a hunch. Is it Jack the Ripper?
Is there a more famous unsolved serial killer than Jack the Ripper? Would you put Jack the Ripper above Zodiac? In terms of just people talking about it, being obsessed with it.
Well, there's no Jack the Ripper movie that I'm aware of, so no. But there's
sure
a person that's something. There's musicals. Is there a musical about it? Am I delusional?
I don't know.
Or did I make this up? Am I having a
It's possible that you're just thinking about, ritzy 1800 English people that make you think there must be a musical. But there could be. I just don't know.
The reason why I say Jack the Ripper is because I feel as though that case is always brought up because of how long it's been unsolved. It's one of the longest standing unsolved cases known, ... It's one that I feel like, I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. I feel like it's one that everyone kind of touches on at least once in a season or once in their, showtime. So yeah, I feel like it's gonna be
except you.
One. Except for me, because
I looked and you didn't do it.
No, I don't. With weird distractions, I avoided doing. I did a couple of known cases, Like I did Gypsy Blanchard because someone recommended it. I did Sam Little because I hadn't heard of him, and then went down that rabbit hole, which that was a week of depression. But yeah, I tried to avoid as much as I could. Yeah, with Jack the Ripper, is it? Question mark? Is it on the list? And if
It
so?
is. It is.
Okay.
Do you have a guess for its spot on the list?
Zodiac's number 2. 7?
Jack the Ripper, according to Time Magazine, is at number 1.
Time Magazine. I would like to know your thinking process. I mean, I get it, but also I don't.
It's been 150 years of people trying to figure this out. He was like the first known famous serial killer in the world. Like there were others, of course, but he was like the first one to make like international news in a time before the internet, before television even.
Before TikTok.
We'll check on that. I'm not sure if TikTok was around or not.
A version of it existed. We just don't know about it.
The version is just you go stand by this clock and you move your body to the ticking and the talking.
And that was the first TikTok dance. I roll.
Well, Jack the Ripper, look, I wouldn't have chosen it for number 1. I'm not mad about it being number 1. I accept it.
I'm on the same page as you. I understand it. I respect it. It wouldn't have been my first pick, but I understand the thinking process.
Well, when we're done with this list, I want to know which of these 10 would you have put at number 1? So, number 1 is Jack the Ripper. In the late 1800s, I think it was 1888, 5 female sex workers were killed in the Whitechapel district of London's East End, their throats slashed and their bodies mutilated. I have more in a second, but I think people forget or don't know. Like, you hear Jack the Ripper, something in the 1800s, it's Britain. I think people kind of forget or discount how fucking brutal the murders really were. These people weren't just like stabbed or shot. I mean, they were mutilated. They were dissected.
As someone that has put in true crime content or put the work in true crime content, there is a bit of dissociation you almost have to have because you don't want to get too, I don't want to say too invested. I mean, I see some true crime content creators out there who really put their work in and really get into it. And, you know, I have so much respect for them. There's a level of disassociation or disconnect you almost have to have, especially to protect your own well-being. And
for your own mental health.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to cases like this where it's so brutal, you automatically kind of, because of the time difference. So for example, I listened to my friend's podcast, Yield Crime, Lindsay.
Yeah, she's been on the show.
You know, she covers cases that are way, 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 way old. And I really respect that and appreciate that because it doesn't mean that those cases don't matter or that, you know, that you don't care about them. But I think there is that kind of already protection she's given herself because of the time that spanned. Again, you still care, you still feel awful, and you feel some form of sympathy or empathy, but I think because as humans we're like, oh, that happened years ago.
Right. It's the same thing with like reading about wars or death in a history book. Like it's hard to get too emotionally attached to soldiers that died in the Civil War because it's so long, it feels like ancient history. And I think Jack the Ripper murder victims is kind of the same thing. And the cases that Lindsay covers on Yield Crime, it's like people can fall into the habit of being like, oh, it happened so long ago, you almost forget there's real people involved.
Which is a bit of a double-edged sword, no pun intended, because I think sometimes we get lost and we just kind of mindlessly consume it. But I think as long as you're listening with a little bit of care and like a little bit of understanding of that and recognizing that, hey, these were real people, you're on the right foot.
Put this in perspective. Zodiac, which was number 2, happened in the 1960s in America. His victims were, I believe they were all shot with a gun. And that's it. Obviously, that's terrible. I'm not saying it's not. But just compare that. I'm saying that to compare that to Jack the Ripper, who killed the same number of victims, at least that we know of, 5, in 1880s England. His victims were mutilated and dissected, their organs taken out. There's actually a photograph, which is crazy that they took a photograph in the 1880s of one of the victims, which is not for the weak at heart. Anyway, one victim's kidney was removed and even mailed to the police, along with a series of taunting notes penned by someone calling himself Jack the Ripper. Now, serial murder was a relatively new phenomenon, and the attacks were highly publicized. Going back to the kidney being mailed to the police, what a day. You're living in, there's no fucking TV, you got nothing to do. You're walking to work, avoiding the horse shit in the cobblestone streets.
Yeah.
And you get to work, and you're a police officer, and you haven't bathed in 6 months because it's the 1880s. And someone says, hey, you got a package for you, detective, here you go. And you open it up, it's a fucking human kidney.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, fun fact, and the only reason why I know this is because I was going through, for the show, I'd print off my notes, read it that way, what have you. And I was going through my notes today, and I'm pretty sure deodorant wasn't invented until 18. Don't quote me on that.
Probably as a result of this case.
Honestly, probably. So you're dealing with just the smell of life in general, and
this is a particularly shitty part of England, by the way, this happened.
Yeah, not so great, not the greatest area. I say that as if I've ever been to London and know the suburbs, but from what I've heard and how it's been described, don't at me. But yeah, just all around a shit way to start your day. And could you imagine having to go to the family of that victim and be like, hey, so it's a mess. It's a mess of a situation.
It's awful.
It's awful, yeah.
Speaking of awful, the law's failure to identify the killer led to such an outcry that both the Home Secretary and London Police Commissioner resigned in disgrace. The removal of internal organs from at least 3 of the victims led to speculation that their killer had some anatomical or surgical knowledge. Because again, who in 1880s has any idea about the insides of the human body besides people in the medical field, right? That you, like me, have never cut into a human body of any kind. But we still know about it just from the internet and movies and TV and books. But back in the 1880s, they didn't fucking know shit unless you were in the field. So yeah. I think that makes sense.
Or you somehow found a YouTube video.
In the 1880s, right?
Yeah. Because YouTube's been around for so long. I'm very much a strong believer in it had to be someone in the medical field or someone who was like an adjacent medical field or butcher. Because, I mean, that was a big trade back then. I'm not saying it isn't now, but big trade back then. And I think anyone who is able to wield some kind of sharp object around some kind of, I don't want to say meat. I think it's got to be one or the other. Like, you can't tell me the painter. There's no way. Then I'd be like, hey, look at the guy who's painting the murals on the ceiling. Where is he getting the paint from?
When they capture him, he's like, damn, I shouldn't have painted the exact same designs that I do on my murals. I should have known that would come back to get me.
I should have known that was going to bite me in the ass one way or another.
Well, one last thing on Jack the Ripper. I want your opinion on this. So, in 2015, the Jack the Ripper Museum opened in East London. It attracted criticism. People saying, it's whatever. But in 2021, in the same area, the Jack the Chipper fish and chip shops opened in Greenwich. And some people threatened to boycott it for its insensitivity. Now, what do you think? Jack the Chipper, is it been long enough and it's a famous enough thing that it's kind of public domain, or is it still no go?
It's gonna be a no for me, dog. I don't know. It's just, I think I have a hard time with the idea of using it as a pun or using it as like, I don't know how to describe it. The museum I could understand. Because I think...
Yeah, me too.
With the museum, you could take some of the evidence that we do know and you put it out to the media. You're also you could honor the victims, give them their, moment, or not moment, but their pedestal to shine on and
awareness.
Highlight awareness, thank you, and their light. When it comes to the fish and chips, that I just feel like crosses a line.
They're getting awareness too.
The vibe is off. I think there's a line... There's a line you just don't cross, and that's it. Like that's
so you won't be eating at Jeffrey Dahmer's butcher shop down opening. I don't have a clever, witty name off the top of my head, but like it'd be the equivalent of like someone trying to cash in on the Jeffrey Dahmer name in America for a restaurant.
I think there's a line, and no matter how much time has passed, again, I'm sure there's arguments for it that make sense, I guess. But I personally, I'm on the side of you could do like 10 different things that don't involve fish and chips.
Well, or there's a 20 billion fish and chips puns out there to pull from. Doesn't have to be the one that involved the brutal murder and dismemberment of 5 women in the exact area.
When I get fish and chips, you know what I don't think of? The brutal murder and dismemberment of women.
Oh, you don't? Weird.
Yeah, I guess I'm the weird one.
Okay, so you've got number 1. In fact, you have number 1, Jack the Ripper. Going back to number 9 is Black Dahlia. You're missing 10, 8, 7, 6 is Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman double murder. You're missing 5 and 4 and 3. Number 2 is the Zodiac. And like I said, number 1 is Jack the Ripper. You're done with serial killer stuff.
Okay, so this is where things get really tricky. You said there was one from Canada, right? What province or territory?
You mean which state? That's the only way I know them. This would be the British Columbia province of Canada.
Oh, I don't know if this is going to be... Is it like the Highway of Tears murders?
No. Actually, the only time I'd ever heard of this is your fellow Canadian Brad Choma. When he was on the show, he mentioned this in passing in our largest Canadian cities episode. Outside of that, I was not familiar with this, but maybe you as a Canadian are more familiar with it. It has to do with a certain body part.
Torso?
No.
No, feet?
Feet.
Oh, it's like the feet that keep washing up on the shorelines.
Yes.
Oh,
the case of the disembodied feet.
Oh, yeah. See, that's why, because I'm not a foot person. So I feel like anytime I've ever seen or heard it, I just it goes to the back of my mind. So it's like, nope, can't. And washes over me. Just
with that logic, people with like a foot fetish would be way into this case.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's true either.
There's someone screaming like, how do you not know? Meanwhile, they're looking up feet. But yeah, no, it's a freaky one though. It's definitely up there.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Given the ranking so far, where do you think this one falls in the top 10?
I'm gonna guess like 7. Yeah, I'm gonna go with
Final answer?
7. Yeah.
7 is exactly right. 7.
I got one. Everybody listening, I made it. I'm officially a true crime podcaster. The one that I
now you can do your next podcast on true crime again.
I can do my next thing. It's all good. It's all good.
Case of the Disembodied Feet is number 7. Now, since August of 2007, at least 20 detached human feet have been found on the coasts of the Salish Sea in British Columbia, Canada, and some in Washington as well in the U.S. The feet are usually... What?
Before you started talking again, I was like, didn't this happen in Washington too, or am I just delusional? So yeah, okay.
Well, I can't speak to whether or not you're delusional, but I can confirm that, yes, some of these happen in Washington.
Perfect.
Both things can be true.
Both things can be true?
So the feet, when they're found, it's a cut-off foot, and they're found in sneakers, though. In the sneakers, it lets the feet kind of avoid decomposition. It gives them protection from decomposition so that when the feet are found in the sneakers, they're relatively intact, even though they've been floating in the ocean for weeks or whatever. Now, no other body parts are ever found. It's always just feet. It's never like feet and hands. It's always feet. Canadian authorities have yet to determine how the feet end up there or why, though DNA tests have matched one of the severed feet to a man who's been missing for several months. A number of theories have been tossed around, including the possibility of foul play, though coroners familiar with the case say ocean currents and decomposition could have naturally separated feet from their owners. I ain't buying that shit because this doesn't happen anywhere else. Others speculate that the remains might belong to 4 unrecovered victims of a 2005 plane crash off Quadra Island. That one makes more sense to me.
I'm not an expert in anything. I don't pretend to be. I don't act like I am. When it comes to forensics, especially like DNA, why can't we test the DNA? Like, I'm assuming the DNA is just untestable for this, or else like why wouldn't they just...
I don't know. I mean, my best guess is because they've been in the ocean, and I know they're preserved in the sneakers, but they're still getting soaking wet feet after so long of that and the salt. Like maybe they're just not... I don't know, but there's still blood in there. So I don't know.
Well, even like just like toenails.
It's because like someone suggested that to a coroner somewhere sometime, and they're like, ew, I don't want to touch the feet, the toenails. No. And so they just never done it. They gotta find someone willing to test the toenails.
Yeah, someone was just like, listen, Rick can do it. I'm not gonna fucking do it. And now we have this unsolved case.
It's hard to blame him. Like, I want to know who did this and why too, but I don't know if I'd be touching the dead toenails. But
no, you can pay me. Like, even if it was my job, I'd be like, you know what? I'll touch a full body before I touch the feet. Like, just the feet alone.
Give me the butt. I'll touch the butt before I touch the feet.
Yeah, I'll go to town. But when it comes to feet, ew.
It would be something if these were disembodied butts instead of disembodied feet. I mean, because like the feet you can explain away through like the airplane crash or maybe something, or, you know, a serial killer that's obsessed with feet. Who knows? The butts would be like a whole other thing.
Listen, I'm not saying you will know exactly want to become the serial killer, but there will be signs. Just a bunch of ass just pop up and
floating around.
Just float around easy.
I mean, imagine a disembodied, decapitated ass just on the beach in Vancouver, Canada. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. You know, because it was a mom and her little kid walking by the body of the Black Dahlia. There's going to be a moment like this with the ass on the Vancouver beach.
When people are just trying to go swimming, go kayaking, enjoy BC, consider BC's beautiful.
Well, you don't need a surfboard, just take one of the ass cheeks out there. Okay, so there's only one other non-US case in here. It's number 10.
Is it back in the UK?
No.
Or is it Australia? Why did I pick up an accent?
No, mate.
Oh no.
You might say this case was no bueno.
Oh.
This case is sometimes called the City of the Lost Girls. Actually, that's the name of the place. City of the Lost Girls. Does that mean anything to you?
No, wait, I feel like it should, but...
I wasn't super familiar with it either. I'd heard of it, but I knew nothing about it until today. This is number 10, Ciudad, Juárez. It's sometimes called the City of the Lost Girls. Juárez is a poor Mexican border town where hundreds, some say thousands, of women have been raped, tortured, and then killed. The murders of women and girls received international violence and bringing perpetrators to justice. Amnesty International has urged Mexican authorities to make finding perpetrators a priority, but with ever-intensifying drug war taking place in the country's poor neighborhoods and a government rife with corruption, little has been done to stop the assault on these women. While around 400 girls and women have been abducted and murdered, police have been accused of conducting rushed investigations. The murders have been referenced in a ton of media, and there was a film about it called Border Town, starring Jennifer Lopez and Antonio Banderas, which I did not see. That's all I got. So this is kind of there's not a lot here other than to say, well, there is a lot here, but there's not a lot of facts, I should say. There's this town where women are known to go missing and being tortured and raped and killed, and no one has any leads on who's doing it.
What the fuck?
400 that we know of have been abducted and murdered, and few arrests and convictions have resulted. For convictions that have been made, there is a great deal of controversy that surrounds them.
That's a lot of people. Like, I think that's an astonishing number.
Imagine 400 people going missing in the States. That would be looked at. Say what you want about America, but that would be looked at.
1,000,000% that would be looked at. Same in Canada. Like, if 400, well, I say that, but then, we have a history of not looking into Indigenous cases, like murder and missing.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look more into this case and might watch that movie.
400 plus women and girls that are just gone or killed. And the police, according to this, have done very little to do anything about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It lands back on like a local police department.
A few episodes ago, I had Alicia and Sierra on from Twisted and Uncorked. We talked about serial killers. What was it? The countries with the most serial killers. In that discussion, we talked about the concept of the, quote, less dead, which are people like sex workers, gay people, people of different ethnicities. Those are people that you could get away with killing more often because the police don't have a priority on them the same way in America you have a priority on young blonde white girls, for example.
Yep.
I'm talking to one now.
I was gonna say,
you're safe if anything happens to you.
I know I'm remotely safe in that if I was to go missing, I would be highlighted on at least a couple news outlets. Like it's that trope. It's the missing white girl syndrome, where if you are not a middle to upper class white woman, blonde hair, blue eyes, no one will look at you, and it's the same everywhere. Unfortunately, like I don't know why there's this hyper fixation on it. I mean, I have my guesses. I think that's also where I get passionate when it comes to true crime, because I feel as though there's so many cases of, for example, murder and missing Indigenous women, two-spirit individuals who, honestly, had I not started podcasting, I would never have heard their names or, like, learned about them. They just decided to leave, or,
they ran away.
Yeah, they died. They took their own life, or they were pretty hard into partying. So I'm not surprised that this is what's happening, or what has happened, especially in Mexico, where I think there's a history. If I'm not mistaken, someone can maybe.
For all I know, I don't know, but for all I know, this could still be happening in this place. Yeah, I don't know if the murders have stopped or not, but it's at least since 1993 is when this says it started, and hundreds, if not thousands, of women and girls just disappear or they're found dead. So, yeah.
Over 30 years ago.
Well, to cheer you up, let's talk about another dead little girl.
That's not what I thought you were going to say, Nick.
But this is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl.
I knew this when we were talking about feet.
Do you want to go back to talking about the butts? No. Let's talk about the butts on the beach again. Will that cheer you up?
On the beaches of BC. Okay, dead little girl. Is it who I think it is?
Who's the most famous blue-eyed, blonde-haired, dead little girl in America?
Ramsey.
Yep.
Oh, what's her?
Yep.
Yeah.
JonBenét Ramsey.
JonBenét Ramsey. So what am I at in terms of numbers again? Number 8?
You're missing 8, 5, and 4. And 3.
Is she number 4?
She's 8.
Whoa. Okay.
I would have thought she'd be higher too, because she's
everywhere.
Like, in the true crime world, in the true crime, people that are into true crime, that create true crime content, JonBenét is like a staple. Like, she's there.
Everywhere. And, you know, I understand it's a weird case. There's so many layers and so many whatever to look at that it's hard not to obsess over it.
Let's call it like it is. Young, blonde, blue-eyed, all that. But another part of it is it's super weird and fascinating. So let's talk about it. And I want to remind the listeners that when I talk about this, and this goes for every case we've talked about, this is a top 10 podcast. We only have so much time to talk about each case. I'm only skimming the surface on all these. There is much more to all these cases that you can seek out if you're interested. So I just want to say that, like, we don't have the answers here. You can do more research. But
absolutely, yeah.
JonBenét Ramsey, number 8. On December 26th, 1996, John Ramsey, a wealthy software executive, found his 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, dead in the basement of their Boulder, Colorado home. 8 hours prior, his wife Patsy found a ransom note demanding $118,000 for their daughter's safe return. No call ever came from a kidnapper. So, put another way, I read the sequence of events backwards. First, they notice their daughter is missing. This is the day after Christmas. Then they find a ransom note in the home demanding money for JonBenét. 8 hours goes by and they find the body. She was in the home the whole time. She's in the basement of the house. She had sustained a broken skull from a blow to the head and had been strangled. National and international media coverage of the case focused on JonBenét's brief beauty pageant career, as well as her parents' wealth and the unusual evidence found in the case. And again, I don't have time to go through it, but you should look through it. There's a lot of weird shit. Like, for example, the ransom note demanded, which if I recall is the exact amount John had received in a bonus from work. Who would know that except him and his employer? And I have my theories. I'll get to it in a second, though. So in addition to obviously the fascination with the case that swept the media also questioned how the police handled the investigation. Spoiler, not well. While John's 2 adult children from a previous marriage were cleared of the murder early on, suspicion remained on the 3 people who were the only ones in the house when she was killed. That would be her parents and her 9-year-old brother, Burke. Almost 3 years after the murder, Burke, now 12, was questioned by a grand jury but never charged. John and Patsy published The Death of Innocence in the year 2000, detailing their story even as they remained suspects in the case. Now, finally, over a decade later, prosecutors were able to conclude that John and Patsy, the parents, were not responsible for their daughter's murder, but that DNA points to an unexplained third party. There was a time where I was very well versed in this case. It's been a minute, so I don't know if new developments have happened. But when I last looked at this case years ago, my conclusion was that the brother Burke, who was 9 at the time, accidentally killed his sister. Mm-hmm. And his parents, they already lost one child. They didn't want to lose another. So in an effort to protect Burke, they came up with this whole conspiracy. They came up with the hoax of the ransom, not expecting anyone to find JonBenét so quickly. And I know JonBenét's father is the one who found her. I don't remember the details. I'm guessing he felt like he had to find her at that moment. He couldn't wait. Anyway, I believe Burke did it and the parents covered it up.
I am also in that theory. I definitely think it was an accident, and I think that definitely the parents tried their best to cover it up, although I think it kind of goes without saying. I think a lot of people think that it was an accidental murder.
Manslaughter.
Yeah, exactly. It was more of a manslaughter case. Did he end up going on like Dr. Phil?
I don't know if it was Dr. Phil. It might have been. He went on like the talk show circuit, and I want to say as an adult he sued somebody for like defamation and stuff. He's like in his 30s now or something. I don't remember all the details, but I know that's a popular theory. Like me and you saying that, we're not like the first people to ever suggest it was Burke. It's a very popular theory. There's only so many theories that can make sense when you read about this crime. There's only 3 people in the house.
Well, 3 people in the house, and there's only so many people that they were close with that would have... I know at one point, wasn't there like a local sex offender that they thought was behind it
that
or
might
something?
Be. Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, there's 3 sides to the story. There's one of the victim, there's one of the perpetrator, and then there's the truth that kind of wraps it all up together.
We may never know, and if we do know, might not be for a while. So, JonBenét Ramsey at number 8. JonBenét Ramsey, the death of one little girl, is like on the same list as, hundreds of deaths in Mexico and these serial killers. It just goes to show how powerful that case was. Not to compare crimes, but like...
No, but also it kind of falls in that line of, like, the one out of Mexico, it's we haven't heard about it. Or hadn't heard about it to the point where it's like, oh yeah, it's like a really well-known case, like everybody talks about it, so to speak. And I wonder if that also plays into how we, as, Canadian American, I don't say content consumers, but how media consumers, I guess is the word, how that media has just not been portrayed upward.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It all comes down to media here. Why do we know so much about JonBenét and Jack the Ripper and Zodiac? Because the media has told us. The media has gravitated toward those cases. And the reason there's lots of reasons they do, but one of the reasons is because they're unsolved mysteries. And like you said a long time ago on this episode, humans are naturally curious about unsolved mysteries. And that's why we're doing this fucking episode, because I know people will listen to it.
It's why we're here.
Yes. You hear that? Shh. Listen. That's the sound of another ad interrupting your podcast episode. Is there anything worse than another ad? But life doesn't have to be this way, dear listener. You could be skipping this very ad right now. In fact, you could skip all ads on Tennis Podcast. All you need is about 10 seconds and you can live your life 100% ad-free. Take those 10 seconds right now and go to tennispod.com/plus. Go ahead, pause this episode and do it right now. At tennispod.com/plus, you can easily sign up to become a TennisPod Plus member. As a member, you'll never hear an ad ever again. But wait, there's more. Members also get access to about 70 exclusive bonus episodes that can't be heard anywhere else. But it's not just bonus episodes. Members also enjoy the exclusive members-only podcast, The Bookbuster, where our own Dr. Buster puts his real-life psychology doctoral degree to good use as he reviews a new psychology or self-help book every month. All bonus episodes and Bookbuster episodes can be listened to right in the very app you're listening to me on right now. No extra apps or know-how needed. There are more benefits too, like free swag, monthly giveaways, blooper reels, and more. So what are you waiting for? Pause my voice right now, take 10 seconds, and go sign up. By the way, if you're an Apple Podcast listener, sign up in just one tap at the top of our Apple Podcast page. So start your free 7-day trial now at tennispod.com/plus or on Apple Podcasts. Or don't sign up at all and sit through more ads right now. The choice is yours. And speaking of which, you have 3 left, 5, 4, and 3. 2 of these 3 remaining have to do with famous people dying. Very famous people.
Okay, well that's going to help a lot. And I mean that like sincerely.
Not like earlier when you were very rude to me
I was like,
off-air.
When my computer just randomly glitched and I was like, Nick, I swear to God, if you don't tell me this was, you made me look like a fool. The first thing that came to mind was the death of Marilyn Monroe.
Great guess. You're on the right track. That one was ruled a suicide now. There's questions about that, but legally, that case was closed, I believe.
Brittany Murphy? Michael Jackson.
Oh, these are all closed cases. Think about 90s rap.
Oh, Tupac. And Biggie, right?
Yeah, Biggie, right. I don't know why they put these two together. I mean, they're like related, but they're also separate incidents. But
yeah,
Time Magazine puts them together, not me. Tupac Shakur, and Notorious B.I.G., the deaths of them ranks at number 3.
That makes sense.
Tupac was an American rapper, widely considered one of the most influential and successful of all time, selling over 75 million records worldwide. Likewise, the Notorious B.I.G., also known as Biggie Smalls or simply Biggie, is also regarded as one of rap's all-time greats. Now, on September 7th, 1996, 25-year-old Tupac attended a Mike Tyson boxing match at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, then got into the passenger seat of Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight's car. At a stoplight, Alex is shaking her head.
Suge Knight. Anyways, go on.
No, I know, I'm with you. At a stoplight, a white Cadillac pulled up next to Knight's car, rolled down its windows, and fired multiple rounds into Shakur's passenger seat. Tupac was taken to the hospital where he died of internal bleeding after 6 days. A few months later, while waiting at a Los Angeles stoplight, the Notorious B.I.G. met the same fate. And thanks to fanatical conspiracy theories, uncooperative witnesses, and shoddy police investigations, neither murder case has ever been solved. I say that with a caveat because September 2023, after Time published this, Tupac's case remained unsolved for decades, but in September 2023, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis was arrested after being indicted by a grand jury for the first-degree murder of Tupac. So I think that means case closed, right?
Technically, I don't know if all the legal proceedings are done. I could be wrong because I...
Oh, you I think that's right.
Big case, especially American when it comes to true crime. Big case, because you basically had these two superstar rap artists who, were pitted against each other really from the get-go, and they both died within months of each other. So of course everyone was like, "Oh, it
both in a
was
drive-by shooting as well."
Yeah, so everyone was like, "Oh, it's their people did it, and this happened, and no, it was actually some." I don't want to say gang, like it wasn't gang related, but people thought it maybe was. Like it's just back and forth, back and forth.
He's got a huge history of sketchy shit. I think it's extremely possible that he's involved. Will he be charged? I doubt it.
I'm sure there are people who really cared about both of them and were friends with both of them, like really like actual friends. But I think with that kind of status, you also get into the realm of quote unquote friends, fake friends, who will do anything to take you out.
I get that a lot as the host of this show, so I understand.
You know what, Nick? I've been worried about you. I've been here on the streets, let me tell you.
I get what you mean, though. Like, when you get to that level of fame and celebrity, you don't know who your real friends are anymore.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
Yeah.
And I feel like from what I've heard and what I've read about Chuck Knight and his, like, didn't at one point he, like, made a comment that he did, like, he was involved with it more than people knew?
I don't recall.
Could be wrong. No. Again, maybe a fever dream.
I think he said, what you're saying might be true, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But he has also said that he thought the drive-by shooting was intended for him because it was his car. He was in the driver's seat, and Tupac was like a casualty.
Which, I mean, hey, maybe that's also part of that the true narrative.
Yeah, well, we'll see if more comes out because, like you said, we still have a trial coming up on whatever his name was. Queef? What's his name? Keefe D? Dwayne Keefe D. Davis? His ass has a trial coming up. So maybe we'll learn more then.
Hopefully. At some point. Sooner rather than later.
You have left 5 and 4. 5 is the other celebrity death. And this one, I agree, is super interesting. And there's a lot of questions. I don't know if I'd put it in a top 10. This is an 1800s celebrity.
Oh.
Give me that.
Okay. Here I was like, oh, Anna Nicole Smith?
I know. Well, that's why I didn't want you to get too far down that road. So
Kurt Cobain? I know his death was... I know it's been really but...
his death was technically... not unsolved.
Yes,
I'm with you.
Yeah.
When I say celebrity, that's the wrong word for it. This man was not a celebrity during his lifetime. He has since become famous author, poet.
Oh, Dickens.
No.
I
don't know how Dickens died. Do you?
Poe? Edgar Allan Poe?
Edgar Allan Poe. Listener of the show.
Dickens die?
I don't fucking know.
This is a good question.
Well, he died of a very boring stroke in 1870. Although he was only 58. Wow. Edgar Allan Poe, how old was he when he died? 40. Exactly 40.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, I don't know, have you looked into Poe's death before? It's interesting.
I want to say yes. I feel as though I've heard about it. I'm a big listener of Aaron Mahnke's Lore podcast, and I think he's talked about it like once or twice on the show.
The death of Edgar Allan Poe is number 5. He was an American writer, best known for his poetry and short stories, particularly his tales of mystery and the macabre. He is widely regarded as a central figure of Romanticism and Gothic fiction in the U.S. and of American literature. But on October 3rd, 1849, Poe was found semi-conscious in Baltimore, after which he was taken to the Washington Medical College, where he died on Sunday, October 7th, 1849. So Poe was not coherent long enough to explain how he came to be in his dire condition, and why he was wearing clothes that were not his own. He was wearing someone else's clothes, he was semi-conscious, and he could not explain to anybody over 4 days before he died what happened. He is said to have repeatedly called out the name Reynolds on the night before his death, though no one knows who he was referring to. His attending physician said that Poe's final words were, quote, "Lord, help my poor soul." That's heavy.
That's heavy.
All of the relevant medical records have been lost, including his death certificate.
Oh, of course.
Newspapers at the time reported Poe's death as a congestion of the brain or cerebral inflammation, common euphemisms for death from disreputable causes such as alcoholism. The cause of death remains a mystery, but some historians believe that he may have suffered from rabies or syphilis.
Oh.
Don't laugh at his rabies death. Alex, what's wrong with you? We're just talking about this. This is a real person.
No, but it puts in perspective how the medical field has grown since then.
If only Michael Scott's run for the rabies cure had happened before Poe's death.
If only. If only. He'd still be here. No, he wouldn't. He's far dead. But still, he'd be...
He would not be here, in fact.
He would have lived to at least a long age of 58. Like, come on.
Wow, yeah. He was hitting the bottle pretty hard. I don't know if he would have made it past his 40s. But
I think I remember hearing that he was a pretty heavy drinker, which, fair. I get it. It's 1800 as well.
If you're writing the shit he's writing, he's
allowed
to drink every now and then.
Oh, absolutely.
But listen to this theory. There's another theory of that he turned up on this. Remember, he was found in clothes that were not his own, and no one knows why. But he turned up on the streets the same day as a citywide election. So some feel that Poe may have fell victim to cooping. Do you know what cooping was? It's a fairly common practice back then in which corrupt politicians paid thugs to kidnap men, especially the homeless, drug them, disguise them, and drag them to the polls all over the city or state. So in other words, they'd find some poor sap, like a homeless person or maybe Poe, who's probably drunk and disheveled somewhere. They find him and they drag him to different polling stations, change his clothes each time so he can vote multiple times for this one politician, beat him up in the process, and that may explain why he's wearing others' clothes.
Did that happen with Trump?
I'm choosing not to go down this path with you.
I just need one jab, and that's it. It's all, and there we go. It's done. We can move on. It rings a bell. I understand. I'm glad that that's not used anymore because that's a very excessive.
Well, for all
way
we
to
know,
get
it could
multiple
still be used, but it's definitely not common. It's not common anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Because when you show up to the polling place and you have like 2 black eyes and missing teeth and your nose is sideways, they're going to know you've been beaten up and you're voting under pressure, right?
Yeah.
Let's knock out the last one here. You just have number 4. This happened in Chicago in the 80s. It had to do with a medication.
Oh, is this the Tylenol murders?
The Tylenol poisonings. Number 4.
Number 4.
This one's never been solved. The Chicago Tylenol murders were a series of poisoning deaths resulting from drug tampering in the Chicago metro area in 1982. The victims consumed Tylenol-branded capsules that had been laced with potassium cyanide. 7 people died in the original poisonings, and there were more... What are you laughing about?
Just in my mind, for some reason, I thought it was like 1 or 2. I didn't realize it was 7. I was like, oh shit, that's a lot more than I thought.
700% higher than you thought.
Yeah. Oh, I shouldn't laugh. That's so sad.
But the thing of the mass hysteria, people hear about this and now it's like, I just gave my kid Tylenol an hour ago. Is he going to die? You know, all this shit.
Yeah.
And there were copycat crimes as well. More people died because of copycat stuff.
You're staring at your kid being like, is today the day or what?
Yeah.
Like, I don't,
Obviously, we know how common Tylenol is in the world, in America, and it's like... Anyway, hysteria followed. A 1982 Times story reported that police cruisers rolling through Chicago streets Thursday afternoon and evening blared warnings over loudspeakers to stop taking Tylenol. The drug was also removed from shelves. Now, no suspects have ever been charged or convicted of the poisonings, but New York City resident James William Lewis was convicted of extortion for sending a letter to Tylenol's manufacturer, Johnson & Johnson, that took responsibility for the deaths and demanded $1 million to stop them. Turned out to be a hoax. He got in trouble. The good thing is the incidents did lead to reforms in the packaging of over-the-counter drugs and to federal anti-tampering laws. So now that's why we got the annoying-ass packaging, which is good, but it's fucking annoying when you try to open up your bottle and there's cotton and wrapping and the child lock. We can thank this guy for that.
Yeah, which when you have a migraine coming on and you're trying to battle with the child lock and the lights are too bright and the sounds are too loud and you're like, yeah, that's like the third layer of hell, I swear. But no, it's good. It's good. I mean, it always takes 1 or 2 incidences or sometimes a lot for those things to happen. I mean, look at the Tide Pod situation that happened not too long ago. Tide Pods literally needed to be blocked. It takes a phenomenon to happen.
Yeah. It's such a dumb thing to die from. The Tide Pods and the Tylenol. Like, I took some Tylenol today, and now through no fault of my own, the Tide Pods would be your fault. But for the Tylenol, through no fault of my own, I'm now going to die. And there's nothing I could have done to foresee this happening, you know? It sucks.
Yeah, and welcome. This is life in a nutshell. You could take something, you might die tomorrow, you might die never. You just never know.
Yeah, life sucks, and then you die. Alex, I have a few honorable mentions that did not make them. We're not going to talk about these. I'm just going to list them off. But some things, you actually didn't guess any of these, but I thought you might have.
Mhm.
Amelia Earhart disappeared. She was the first female pilot.
I was
Her
wondering.
plane disappeared. It's never been found.
That's why I asked him, like, is this like a celebrity? Like when I asked if they were an actor, that's where my mind went. But
sure. We definitely believe you that you're not just saying that after the fact.
I'm not trying to win people over at this point. Like, guys, I'm actually sorry.
Another plane-related incident was D.B. Cooper. You didn't guess D.B. Cooper.
Oh no, did not guess D.B. Cooper.
He famously hijacked a plane. No, he did not hijack a plane. He threatened the flight attendant with a bomb in exchange for money, took a parachute off the plane, and was never found ever again, which is crazy. The Roanoke colony's disappearance.
Oh, yeah, Roanoke. That's a spooky
The
one.
Alcatraz escape of 1962. Those guys were never found. A couple people broke out of Alcatraz prison, never been found. The Mary Celeste ghost ship.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Do you have thoughts on the Dilatov Pass incident?
That's another one that I don't know if I'll ever talk about on a podcast, just because I feel like it's so many people have talked about it to the point where I'm like, maybe they just died.
It is interesting. There's some interesting shit there. I'll just say to the listeners, if you're not familiar with it, look it up. Dilatov Pass. All right, let's go back through the top 10. And when I'm done, you're going to tell me that if you were in charge of ranking this list, I just need your number one. But what is the number one most famous, most talked about, most well-known unsolved murder? Or not murder, unsolved mystery, unsolved case. According to Time, it's number 10, the women of Ciudad, Juárez. That's the 400-plus women murdered in Mexico. Number 9 is the Black Dahlia. Number 8 is JonBenét Ramsey. Number 7 is the case of the disembodied feet in Canada. Number 6 is Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, who were definitely murdered by O.J. Simpson. Number 5 is the death of Edgar Allan Poe. Number 4 is the Tylenol poisonings in Chicago, 1982. Number 3, packaged together, is Tupac and Biggie, their deaths. Number 2 is the Zodiac Killings, and number 1, Jack the Ripper.
From an empathetic standpoint, I'd switch 1 and 10 because just the amount of victims alone, that should be just, but I know that's not what was asked. I still think the Black Dahlia would be a lot higher. I don't know, like
I agree.
4?
I agree it'd be higher. I wouldn't put it at 1, but I do think it should be higher.
I definitely initially when we first started recording, I thought it was only 1. We've talked about it. I'm leaning on like 4 or 5, maybe even 3, but other than that...
Oh, by the way, real quick, another one that people might be yelling at me this whole episode is the JFK assassination.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason that's not on this list is I believe that case is technically closed because they pinned it all on Oswald. Whether or not you believe that's another issue, but if you're wondering why that hasn't come up, that's why. On this list, I think Black Dahlia is a good choice. I think Jack the Ripper, which is number 1, I don't think that's the worst choice for number 1. It feels weird putting JonBenét at number 1, but I feel like that's the one I hear about the most.
And I think you're a millennial, right? Like
I'm a millennial, yeah.
Okay, so I think
for better or worse.
For better or for worse. I think for our generation, that's a case we kind of grew up with. I remember being a kid and hearing like my mom and her friends talk about it or hearing it being talked about. So I feel like there's that connection too. In comparison to like Jack the Ripper. Didn't really learn about that until like high school.
Or even the Zodiac happened long before us. So yeah, I think there's something to that. We all have our biases, right?
Edgar Allan Poe, that one, for some reason, I didn't count as an unsolved.
I agree. I didn't expect to see him here. I think it is interesting, but I didn't expect him to be on a top 10 list. One of my top 10 favorite true crime podcasts is Weird Distractions. Why don't you tell people more about it and how to listen to it?
So, yes, Weird Distractions. It is technically now over. R.I.P. You can still stream it on Spotify, Good Pods, Apple Podcasts, basically wherever you tune in to podcasts. Each week I rotate between true crime, paranormal, conspiracy theories, folklore, kind of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, in hopes to provide you a distraction from everyday life, whether you're trying to forget about a bad breakup or you're trying to not think about work stress, whatever it may be. Again, you can find where we find 10ish podcasts. And although there's not new episodes out, you can check out new episodes almost every week from the other shows in the network I'm a part of, which is Cultivate. So we've got Red on Wiki, we've got Spooky Tales, we've got EO Crime, we've got Horror House. And that's horror, not horror. Sometimes I feel like I say that too fast. I have to emphasize. horror house.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm a little less interested in it now,
Yeah.
but I do appreciate you clarifying. And, you know, for our listeners, a lot of the podcasts Alex just mentioned, Reddit on Wiki, Yield Crime, the hosts of those shows have been on this show. So it's a natural next choice for you. I'm going to put the link to Weird Distractions in the show notes, as well as to Cultivate, to their website. And for Weird Distractions, the great thing about that show is even though it's over, there's 200 episodes. You could listen to it for the next however long, and there'd be plenty there. And Alex covers mostly unheard of, or lesser known cases. So we covered, you know, obviously top 10 today, but if you're looking for something that's been a little less covered, that's a great place to start. Cool. Well, Alex, today we talked about unsolved mysteries, but it's no mystery why I had you on the show. I've loved having you here. Thank you for talking death and dismemberment and decapitated butts with me. I'll have to have you back sometime.
Thank you so much, Nick. I really appreciate it, and I would love to come back and talk more about what's washing up on the shores of BC. Hopefully no more foot things, because
we're done with feet. Whoever that is putting the feet in the water, give us something else. Give us some kneecaps.
It's 2024. Leave feet behind.
We're not about the feet. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of this episode. You can shoot me a note on your favorite social channel, X, Facebook, YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, all of them, at tennispod, at 10ishpod. You can also shoot me an email at tennispod. Until next time, she's Alex, I'm Nick. Thanks for listening.
Bye.